Not to borrow the intro of another pod, but what a week this has been. I'm home this week, cold, happy to be in the winelands of South Africa. It's been a long time. I'm happy to be home. I don't really appreciate just being idle a bit, to be able to think. And yeah, it's been good to be home. My week has been filled with client pitches, contract submissions, and monthly catch up meetings with our portfolio entrepreneurs. Interesting lessons learned throughout. And one thing that I'm always amazed is the extent to which we have to go in order to ensure the outcomes we hope for. And even with all of the parameters and all of the interventions and all of the key performance indicators and things we put in place, it was still there's no guarantee. I think the nature of venturing is you are venturing, and things happen when you venture. So it's been good though. Really enjoying being back doing admin work a bit and actually just focusing on our next 18 months and what we want to achieve with that. So, some of the interesting things that I've seen in the media making up some of the key points on the roster this week. Uh, I'm going to speak a little bit about them. Some are a little bit more than a week old, might be even be 2 weeks old. But before I go on, if you are new to this content, I am Yongama Squarea, and I will be your host for yet another episode of the podcast that dives into the core of business development and entrepreneurial growth. I like to speak on all things business, innovation, and enterprise. So, first on our roster is the iKhokha transaction. The South African bank Ned Bank Group has entered into a binding agreement to acquire fintech startup or company. We can't call iKhokha a startup anymore for $94 million or 1.65 billion rands, all in cash. This will allow for some of the most interesting and improved payments within the South African landscape. iKhokha, though, have had first mover advantage for a number of years over the competitors that are there, more significantly Yoko. But it needs to be mentioned, Yoko is performing extremely well in the market. They've really kind of gotten a good product market fit of the technology, the hardware, as well as the software that goes with it. They seem to understand their market, and they've really nullified any first mover advantage that iKhokha used to have. The business, in my opinion, should be nearing a dollar unicorn by the end of 2027. Incredible business, incredible impact within the landscape. But in any case, maybe this acquisition by Nedbank of iKhokha will give them a new lease on life, especially as they focus on the small to medium business space. And maybe that's where things will happen for them. It needs to be borne in mind also. We've seen similar plays go down over the last few years. I don't know whether you still remember when the folks at FirePay exited SnapScan to Standard Bank. What was originally a very innovative payment platform used across most of Cape Town in coffee shops, parking facilities. It was an incredible innovation at the time. Became less and less available after the the acquisition. I think having gone into a corporate, they did not go out and convince vendors to take up the offering. And therefore, there were less and less places where you could use SnapScan, as opposed to when it was still an entrepreneurial business. Every second or third day, there was a new vendor who was added onto the list. It was an exciting time. And I would think that, you know, oh, I'll hate to think that the new owner of iKhokha will end up doing something similar, actually just shelving and putting the product there and not really going out and being aggressive to make this $94 million make sense, or at least the spending of it. But we wish them the best and congratulate the entrepreneurs behind iKhokha. This has been a really good thing to witness within the South African ecosystem, within the African fintech ecosystem, where there is still significant space and opportunity for startups and specifically fintech startups to actually exit to established banks to offer something new, something innovative, something that the banks with their huge balance sheets are not able to reproduce themselves and are having to go to the market to see where to get these. So it's an incredible thing, and we really commend this, and we'd like to see more such opportunities come through for the ecosystem. Then, secondly, on the roster is a article that I read on the demise of Wanatu. So, some months ago, on my monthly visits to the capital, which is Pretoria, I came across what I heard was an Afrikaner e-hailing service. You heard that right? Afrikaner, as in the minority white grouping within South Africa. To my knowledge, this business was positioned as for Afrikaans speakers by Afrikaans speakers. So I was told. Well, I use Uber. I use Uber a lot, actually. I think I've got a 4.75 rating on Uber, and I've had well over 200 Uber rides. So I'm actually, it might be significantly more than that. So I use Uber a lot. And over the years that I've been using Uber, I've come to understand the e-hailing ecosystem across South Africa. As I use the service in all the major cities, the first tier cities as well as the second tier cities, throughout my operations on an annual basis. So I'll use Uber in a small city like Kimberley. I'll be using Uber in a bigger city like Cape Town or Durban or wherever. So wherever I go, I usually use Uber. So, uh, and I know about the disgruntled feelings shared by Uber drivers in places like Gqeberha, the creative co-driving for both Uber and Bolt in East London, as an example, and many other places, as well as the violence experienced by e-hailing drivers within Johannesburg and Pretoria. I can share stories and anecdotes of some of the trips and remarkable things that Uber drivers experience on a daily basis, and they share these with you as you sit there. Well, I like to talk to people, so I get to hear these stories. So, all in all, I feel that I'm quite well suited to have an opinion on the sector and its developments within South Africa. As I've come to understand, the founding of Wanatu was to serve Afrikaans speaking communities while promoting job creation within that demographic. What quite a noble pursuit and one that should be encouraged. But let's consider the historical context upon which this ideology is based. So, the owners of majority of the land and those who have access to capital as a racial or cultural group have embarked on a campaign to further empower themselves through job creation for an already empowered group. It's not so noble, but let's give it to them. You want to help your own, and charity starts at home, and all of that jazz. So yeah, let's see. But what I fail to see is who would have taken up these jobs. Again, it's the empowered trying to empower themselves. So, who in their ranks would be able to take up these jobs? So, maybe it's students looking for extra cash, but labor force does not reside within the Afrikaner community. Largely because I think as subgrouping within South Africa, they've got unemployment that's less than 12%, could even be significantly lower than that. I might have my stats incorrect. So they don't have a lot of unemployment versus the majority of the country. So it could be interesting how they go about doing things there. Also, do they have the relevant numbers to undertake such uh, an undertaking? In the sense that, do you have enough people to transport and transport frequently in order for you to generate the kind of returns or income that is needed? Again, to showcase the extreme access to capital, the company owned its whole fleet of 50 Toyota Corolla Cross hybrid vehicles. This in itself a major departure from the point of e-hailing success story, which is being based on an asset light business model utilizing independent contractors. Wanatu, which means where are we going? Wanatu is, yeah, or was at least, because now this is in the past tense, was going against that established understanding. I would imagine when you own the fleet, you would have to fully employ the drivers, and as an incentive scheme on non-owner drivers is quite negatively correlated, because when I own my vehicle and I decide to work 2 or 3 extra hours, I understand why I'm doing that, because I get to earn more. But if I am salaried, I've got a fixed amount that I get on a monthly basis. Whether I work 8 hours, 10 or 12 hours is irrelevant, because I've got my salary. Unless they had another system of aligning the incentives there, that the more you work, the more you get. But essentially, the incentive scheme is not in harmony, and I don't think people would work harder. So, as nothing empowers people more than allowing them to receive greater compensation for greater effort put in to what they are doing. Once again, these drivers being permanently employed meant that they offer to the company real overheads. They are a cost point that needs to be looked at all the time. The company's growth strategy is to a large extent not curtailed, but in many ways limited, because your capital allocation now needs to look into, okay, recruitment of these drivers, training of these drivers, purchase of a new vehicle, all of those things, insuring this new vehicle, and all of those things that the traditional asset light model does not make provision for. Hence, they are able to have scenarios where they offer incentives for people to come through and test the opportunity, and having incredible customer acquisition uh, plans where the CAC can go as far as, let's say, $100 to $200 per user, knowing that the lifetime value of that user will far exceed that, which I fear might not have been the case here with Vanatu, as their customer acquisition cost has a massive overhead component linked to it, which is getting more drivers on board and all the other things that I've mentioned. But hey, I'm sure they had their reasons for it, and they went to the market and they did the best that they could in there. And to their credit, Vanatu had a focus on vulnerable passengers, such as school children, that ended up making about 35% of their users. As an Uber driver once explained to me, those trips are not very profitable. They are short, kids from home to school, and especially for Afrikaner people, because Afrikaner people don't have a spatial displacement issue or challenge on them, unlike black families. So maybe let me take you a little bit back. During apartheid years, white people took up all the better amenities and areas. So their proximity to central business districts, to business parks, to industrial parks, to schools was quite a short distance, versus black communities who were on the outskirts, having to travel hours and long distances from where they live to where they need to be, whether it is for schooling or for shopping. So, that ability to travel long distances to make more money, because ultimately, how e hailing works is, on a per kilometer basis, is curtailed. And therefore, you would struggle because you've got all of those short commutes. They are not as profitable. So I cannot imagine that Vanatu experiences or experience something different to what the Uber drivers comment as a problem. So yeah, I don't think they were very or highly profitable in that regard. This business was not without successful milestones, though. There is a reason they received successive rounds of financing and investment. For instance, from December 2024 to January of 2025, the number of users grew from 10,000 to 30,000, which is quite impressive, given the size of the population. Quite impressive. Uh, but it dwarfed the number of users of e-hailing services like Uber within South Africa. I think Uber is estimated to have about 2.1 million users across South Africa. And if we had to extrapolate that to a city like Pretoria, I am thinking it's well over 500,000 just within Pretoria, or maybe 300 to 500,000 within Pretoria, being a major economic hub and a major city within South Africa. So I don't know on those terms how Vanatu thought they would be competitive in this market. The business model was a bit wonky, given how traditionally these businesses work. But hey, it is what it is for them. And I think it's part of why they went into liquidation. So, in closing, Vanatu's business model is nothing new in South Africa, or especially within the South African market. Decades of one sided economic development has resulted in the Afrikaner community having a highly effective market application over our economy. Some notable similar initiatives are within the insurance industry. There's an insurance company called Verseker, which is insure but in Afrikaans, which also focuses on this particular group, which is the Afrikaner group, and particularly Afrikaans as the language upon which you communicate with the people for insurance. And it's a niche market that has worked very well for themselves. You've got apparel companies like Burbu that are doing extremely well within this niche market of Afrikaners and Afrikaans. If you look at the music industry, the biggest selling artists are Afrikaner artists or Afrikaans singing artists. Refensi, which is a black artist that sings in Afrikaans, is doing extremely well. Yet his other black counterparts who don't sing in Afrikaans are not doing as well in terms of revenue generation. So it is incredibly fertile or incredibly economically viable niche market. But even that was not something that could help Wanatu. It may just be that the numbers did not make sense because most of the users of e-hailing services are black, and as I indicated, when people live or where people need to travel longer distances, there's more money to be made. And as black people have less access to personal vehicles versus white people, we have a greater need. So there's a greater utility of such services as opposed to white people. And as a grouping, we may not hold that much economic prowess, but because of the numbers, we are able to move certain markets in that. So I think companies like Wanatu should always look at the prevailing complexities of cultural specificity and regulation in emerging tech driven industries, because it's not just as easy as plug and play like the insurance guys have done. You might need to look broader as to who takes the service, under what circumstances, the distances, and all of those things, in order for you to be able to have something that is meaningful. But hey, it's sad that a business that was doing something, I don't agree with the reasons behind what they were doing, but it's still very good for the economy that there is some economic drive happening, that it got liquidated. It was not profitable. Mind you, it took a while for Uber to also reach profitability, but it was in the realm of Uber trying to access a global audience. While these guys, the size of their universe is 8.45 million Afrikaner people in South Africa. And 90% of them have their own vehicles. So it was always going to be an uphill battle for them. And yeah, here we are now, and they are fully liquidating. It's a sad thing, but it is what it is. And that brings me to my third and last point to discuss. This one, it hits a little bit close to home. It's FFA, or Founders Factory Africa. In passing, I would just like to comment on this because in many ways it is a scandal, and it is a scandal that has hit the venture market in South Africa in a very bad way. So Founders Factory Africa, which rebranded to 54 Collective in 2024. Um, you get it now why they called 54 Collective. There's 54 states in Africa. Cute name. So this was essentially a venture capital firm and startup studio that supported transformative technology companies across the African continent. Well, I do not know much about the scandal that has broken, but essentially there were monies that were misappropriated that should not have it done so. But I think everyone can take their time to Google and check into this. Uh, uh, there's court proceedings and stuff like that, and I really don't think it's my place to delve deep into this. Because it's not about structure of business and business development. It's about people's ethics and stuff like that. And I don't comment on other people, you know. But what I do want to comment related to it is that this scandal has broken, I feel that the ecosystem is poorer because of the liquidation of this entity due to the negligence, maladministration, corruptive conduct of this executive team. And this will forever rob the continent of similar initiatives being pioneered in future. And more importantly, because they received their money from MasterCard, that international players would not want to work with African pioneers, African entrepreneurs, and African ecosystem developers because of this example. So I'm very saddened by their conduct because they are precluding so many potential things that could have happened from happening, or because they could not manage themselves as they expanded and they wanted to have greater um, social standing and various other reasons why people do what they did. But it will forever be a blight on our efforts within the ecosystem. And I feel very bad for the enterprises that were supported that now might not get that same support when these guys are fully liquidated and out of the ecosystem. It's really sad when things like this happen. And on that note, thank you once again for taking the time to listen and follow this pod as we do our part in building an inclusive, economically vibrant South Africa. I call to each and every entrepreneur, business owner, and South African patriot that we hold hands to create a society that works for all of us. Let us not look at race as a basis for doing business. Let's not look at other factors that are there to break us down, but rather look at how we can foster growth, improve our economy, and just generally be contributors to a better future. Because ultimately, a society that improves the lives of the marginalized is of more importance than us facilitating anything else. It is incredibly important that business plays its part as the head of the spear in social cohesion, in social development, and more importantly, in creating an economy that will generate the jobs that we so desperately need, that will improve the lives of people, and more importantly, through tech, democratize access to many things, whether it be healthcare, education, and many other services that are currently difficult to access at this stage. And I call on all budding, future, present, and other entrepreneurs to actually take a stand and say, you know what, I will contribute to my country, I will contribute to my continent by actually being the best I can at building whatever I need to build that I think would be of value and will serve communities as a whole. This is Yongama, your Sultan of Sustainable Business Development, signing off. Until next time, let's keep the core strong.